Hello, this video is about some of the registration aids within Hauptwerk. Having learned a lot from other pioneers online, I wanted to share how I use the system myself, and while some of this may be common knowledge, there may be some tips or tricks that you find useful. So without further ado, let's dive in. In 2019, I took delivery of this wonderful 3-manual and pedal MIDI console from Content, based on their Cambiari line. It came with a default European-style set of pistons, but since I planned to use my own computer, I was free to assign these as I wished. I needed some additional tools, and thanks to Richard at Beauty of Sound, I learned about this simple USB pedal, which I use for sequencer advance. I opened with a fragment of C.S. Lang's organ sonata. I needed more pistons, and to that end I added an X-Keys stick. It is helpful to think of the sequencer as a massive bank of 999 generals. My arrow buttons are used to navigate but not trigger the sequencer. For example, I'm using these arrows to navigate to position 40 in the queued window and back to the 0 position. I then activate sequencer frames from my number pistons, which also illuminate and serve as a visual aid as to where I am in the sequence. I can jump around with these pistons, or I can step forward to the next step by pressing the foot pedal, or by using the advance button on my X keys. I also added a reverse button to my X keys setup. So for one piece I might start at 40, another at 20, and so on. I generally try to keep the 01 to 09 as a default set of generals for regular use. My other pistons include the usual setter, a grate to pedal coupler, general cancel, and I've set up my X keys to give me additional generals labeled A through E, which are distinct from the sequencer, and these trigger Hauptwerk's master generals. Meanwhile, the numbers 1 through 8 are my swell divisionals. I can access a second layer of the strip, and now 1 to 8 can be used other controls as needed. So let's talk about setting all of this up. Some of the features I will describe are new in Hauptwerk 6, particularly the ability to map my console buttons to master Hauptwerk controls independent of which sample set is loaded. This was a feature I was very excited about. I'm loading one of the alternate configuration of Hauptwerk, a great way to play and learn without messing up your primary settings, and I'm going to start from scratch so you can see how I got this to work. And at this point, all I've done is map the manual's pedals and expressions, but no stops or pistons. In Hauptwerk 6, I recommend opening the menu item General Settings, MIDI key triggers for master pistons and menu functions for all organs. Everything I auto-detect here stays in place regardless of what sample set I've opened. This saves a lot of time, and contrasting that with a similar dialog which lives under the organ settings menu. From the scrolling list, I'm going to keep moving past the master generals until I get to the master general cancel, and this will be the first piston I auto-detect. So I'll click auto-detect, and done. Continuing on past the scoped combination pistons, and we'll return to these later, brings us to the stepper. My arrows I'm mapping to the queued -10s and +10s digit, which allows me to navigate the sequencer without triggering it. Next to the actual sequencer advance, I have one sequencer reverse, so let's auto-detect that. Now I have two sequencer advance, so the foot pedal goes on one and the X key goes on the other. Finally here, I also map trigger 000 to my general cancel. And the dialog appears, yes, confirm, I'm triggering both with this. This will also reset the sequencer when I hit general cancel. Finally on this dialog, I have to trigger just the single digit. So scroll to the bottom of this list and you will find these XX0 auto detect. That's for my 0. I can now click OK. So let's briefly talk about scoped pistons. At first, this can seem difficult to wrap one's head around, but it's an incredibly powerful feature. Hauptwerk can be told to only affect certain clusters of stops, just like divisionals, but you can get creative with this. And do check out Richard McVeigh's Hauptwerk hack video about the emergency coupler piston. While you can use any divisionals that are included in a sample set, if you follow these steps, you can have divisionals on any organ. So let's work through an example on the St. Anne's set. We will view large floating control panel, master scope combinations all, and also large floating control panel registration. So these are the two tools that we will need available. Now you'll notice that the master scope pistons are replicated, but a smaller number of them on the registration toolbar. So that's why I usually will have both of these for the initial setup. So the first thing to do is to set the scope of the pistons. So set scope, and I'm going to draw all of the stops that I want to be affected by this, perhaps also including the octave and suboctave couplers. Now I'm going to click each of the pistons. Again, we're in set mode, and this is telling Hauptwerk that all of the A's are going to affect only the stops I've selected. I can hit general cancel. At any time I can check my pistons have been scoped to by clicking the scope button and clicking on the piston. And again, it's pulled out all of the swell stops for right now. Let's save the clarinet into A1. So I can cancel that now. Let's activate a general, but when I press A1, only the swell clarinet moves, so I've successfully created some swell divisionals. And I can replicate this process across the board. Once again, it's possible to right-click on these and auto-detect. However, I recommend mapping the scoped combination pistons using Hauptwerk's auto-detect within the general dialog. So I hope you found this tour of Hauptwerk sequencing features useful. Feel free to leave any questions or additional suggestions in the comments, and happy sequencing!